Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, you guys were hyping without me. You were hype training, and I wasn't even on screen yet. Bravo to you. You are the true heroes. Thank you for the donos. Thank you for the bits. Really appreciate you all. Yeah, thanks for coming, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. We are going to be talking today about the decline of Pax Americana. What is that? America as a world power, a world leader, and influencer on the stage, both militarily and politically. In recent years, some have said that this is waning, that we, the American hegemony, are on the decline. Is that true? Are we actually less influential today than we were 20 years ago? Or is it simply cope? Uh, if we are, is that a good or a bad thing? We have fires springing up across the globe, from the Israel Palestinian conflict to the Ukraine Russia war, um, threats of China and Taiwan, and other conflicts have all popped up in the last year to 2 years. Is this just a sign of things to come? I've gathered a team of specialists to talk about this today. And by specialists, I
Testing,
mean people
testing.
who said yes to my invite. So, with that, we're going to get into it. I'll let all these people introduce themselves, give a brief opening statement, and then we'll get into it. We're going to start with first time guest on my show, Alucard. Is that how you like to be called,
Yep.
or you want
A la
Hex, or
carte.
what?
A la carte sounds fine. Yes.
Alucard,
Yes,
go
indeed.
ahead.
So I'm a la carte Hex. I have a presence on Twitter. Way back in the day, I think I used to stream Dark Souls on Twitch like a couple years ago. I've never really been in on one of these before. I think like like way back in the day, I think I hopped on one of Prime's panels. But yeah, and I'm not streaming right now either. So I'm just doing this for the love of the game, basically. On a personal level, I have some background in international relations, educationally and professionally. And yeah, my handle is Alucard Hex on everything, Twitch, Twitter. That's pretty much where I'm at. As I said, I'm not streaming, but I'll write something in the chat just so you people can find me. And as far as the actual topic goes, so the first thing I want to say is that everything is kind of highly contingent on what we mean by Pax Americana. It's a pretty old definition, and it has kind of been a fairly nebulous concept all along, which is why we say it in a weird, dorky, dead language instead of just speaking American like normal people. But I guess I'll try to get at it as best I can. So, question number one is the Pax Americana in decline? I think the evidence in favor of that is actually quite scarce because while we do have, a couple relatively big conflicts going on, America is not actually a participant in either of those, and we sort of have not had the chance to witness America, struggling for ourselves yet. And if in the military dimension, and if we look at the diplomatic and economic dimension, I would actually argue that there are examples that serve as evidence that the Pax Americana is actually strengthening because we have NATO expansion, we have Biden making inroads with some people like, for example, Lula of Brazil, and just today there was some kind of new deal that was announced with Maduro in Venezuela, and for instance, we have Vietnam looking to buy American F-16. So I think we're doing pretty well on that front. Of course, there are factors that could point to the decline of Pax Americana, such as, let's say, the decline of the defense industrial base in America, or maybe Biden's lack of vision and inclination to act reactively as opposed to proactively, or maybe the American public becoming more isolationist. But I think all of those are quite insignificant. And lastly, should we cheer for it to decline? Should America sort of stop being the world's policeman? I think my answer for now is no. I think currently any potential replacement to America would be significantly and obviously worse. And honestly, even if you looked at this thing in a vacuum, I think America has been a fairly benevolent hegemon these past few years now that we've gotten rid of some of the uh, excesses, shall we say, from, like, let's say,
Okay.
the global war on terror and all of the prior eras. So yeah, basically, I'm gonna be an America simp on this one.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Next up, Joe.
Thanks, Rick. My name's Joe Brooks. I'm not particularly big online. I'm a stand-up comedian. Call it a hobby, but I run some nights around Stroud. Um, I basically just kind of got into this out of interest. I can't say I have an educational background in anything Pax Americana related. It's purely wow, this was going on and I thought I'd add my bit. So as far as it goes, I'd say America is somewhat declining in that I feel Europe as a whole is putting a lot less trust in America than it used to. Partly I think that's because America as a whole, from both right and left, is far less keen to enter military conflicts now. It's acting more as a negotiator and persuader, which I think is perfectly fine, but is understandably weakening its image a bit in that regard. I'd also say another aspect is simply Trump, and that certain sections of the world feel a lot less comfortable with the possibility of what's going on in the Republican Party and what that could mean for America's presence and what it chooses to do versus pre Trump. I mean, we all understand that Bush was, well, I doubt there's that many people who are hugely pro Bush, but I do think the backlash from that era has caused a bit of a thing where nobody is really comfortable with outward aggressive militarism in the way that they maybe were previously, although I guess you could point to Vietnam as an earlier example. But that's my basic statement for now. Let's let someone
Okay.
else have the talk.
Well, thanks for being here, and I'm sure we'll get to it as we go. Next time, another first-time guest on my show, Mooncake. What you got?
Okay. Hi. Sorry, you can hear me. I'm okay, right? Just to make sure.
Yes, go.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, my audio is being weird. So yeah, I go by Mooncake. I'm a relatively new streamer, I would say. I just play League of Legends. I talk about political topics. And I'm a huge history buff, so I kind of talk about that as well. Um, so basically, just to make it kind of short and sweet, I believe America is starting to feel the erosion of their global standing. The era of dominance that America has showed, in my opinion, has started to dwindle. We can see this as it pertains to America's ability to manage security and global economics. Now, that's not really to say that America is not currently like a superpower in the world. However, the question kind of is how long will that last? As we've all seen, China has emerged as a large player, especially economically through their military, and right now they're actually the world's lead manufacturing power. In addition, that we've seen with the invasion of Ukraine from Russia, there's a growing tension between the USA and China. This kind of threatens to upend the status quo, and with it, Pax Americana. And with my opinion, I'll kind of go into the fact that this is bad for all of us. I should mention that I am Canadian, so this is very bad for me. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here, and we'll get into it. Canadian or otherwise, you're welcome on my show.
Okay.
Speaking of welcome on my show, no matter what, Prime, go ahead.
Okay. Canadians are allowed reluctantly on my show. Um, so you can hear me well? Okay, yeah. It's only low on your fucking server. I don't know why. But anyway, we'll move past that. Yeah. So Pax Americana, I think it is weakening. I think we have plenty of evidence to that. In fact, I think Mooncake was touching on exactly where I was going to go with this as well. We can see with the Russia-Ukrainian conflict that where America, put its foot down, saying Russia is now persona non grata, where is a pariah state, and instituting a sanctions regime against it. That sanctions regime has been ineffective, right? It slowed them down a bit, but Russia and China have created alternate financial routes and trading
Mhm.
patterns that we cannot affect. They We can see also in terms of BRICS, right? The BRICS country being Brazil, Russia, India, China. Uh, let's see again. Fuck. again. South Africa. No, that China was okay. Yeah, I got it. Shut
You'll
up.
get there.
I did say China. Okay. Shut up. But anyway, they are forming their own little union in competition to ours, right? Being the Western Alliance, specifically NATO. I think that this is inevitable when America has been such a poor steward of the global economy, about the global order. Um, it could have been worse, which would be the argument from like the pro side, right? Like we could have had a more dictatorial overseer, but I feel that we haven't been as equitable as we needed to be, and in recent times we have shown that our country itself is not functioning in terms of our political processes, and so why wouldn't people doubt us? Why wouldn't Europe decide not to rely on us, as Joe very helpfully pointed out? So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks for being here. We'll get into it as we go. And last but certainly not least, Socrates, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, if you don't know me, I'm Socrates here at Socrates TV. I'm a scientist, but I love philosophy, politics, history. So this is pure passion for me. So on the topic of Pax Americana, I guess I'd like to clarify, maybe it's something we can do early into the debate, exactly what we're talking about in terms of, like, if we exert soft power, if we're having kind of a leading role in how other countries might be aiding Ukraine, but we're not having boots on the ground. Is that Pax Americana, or is that not Pax Americana? Is it really only if we're actually going in, shock and awe, blowing up all of Iraq in 4 days? So that's something I'd like to clarify. Either way, I was pretty disappointed. I think echoing Joe Brooks earlier, talking about the Trump administration, when Nikki Haley in her speech to the UN said that America was officially abdicating our position as any kind of moral authority on the world stage. That was sad to me, and I believe that we exited out of the UN Security Council. If someone can confirm that, I believe that occurred. Which,
I believe.
yeah, maybe it's not the
No.
worst thing because we vetoed a lot of things that we shouldn't be vetoing. So, but overall, I don't think it's good for America to get out of the world stage, to just let China do imperialism for a while. I don't think it's good for us to, given that we have done so much to become involved with so much of the world, so much of the world looks to us, to simply be silent, I think is not a good policy. I think it's important for us to, yes, be better than the Bush administration or other administrations with just our wanton wars, but at the same time, to make statements and to make statements that make the world better.
Okay. Go
I
ahead,
think
floor's open.
Yeah. So I think you're exactly right, Socrates, and shout out to you, Socrates. I haven't seen you in a little
Hey,
bit.
buddy.
Good friend of mine. But yeah, I
Oh,
defining Pax Americana.
just a correction. The U.S. did not exit the Security
We
Council.
didn't. Okay.
It exited the UN Human Rights Council.
Ah, Jesus.
Oh,
Well, I wish
No
that we
surprise.
would exit the Security Council.
I mean, but we would never do that. I mean, that
Yeah.
would actually be the end of Pax Americana if
Yeah.
we actually did do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to define it, I think is a worthwhile project here, because I would imagine, since my understanding would be that like it is like America leads the overall like world order and sets the agenda, like militarily, economically, and to a certain extent, minimum expense, socially, right? That we can extend our influence, not just directly with where our military reaches out and touches you, but also through our proxies. And being able to rally the world around a cause in a way that like other countries generally can't. So when we talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that would seem to me like an example of Pax Americana, where a portion of the world, not all of it, not as much as previously, jumped onto our sanctions regime and assisted us with that. But like like I'm been implying that power has been lessening as we go along. And one final thing is that, like you said, like it would be a bad thing for the U.S. to step back and be silent, and then like China do hegemony. I guess like if that's our only other option, then I would agree. But I don't think that's where we're headed, right? I don't think America will like willingly give up its place in the world. Instead, it'll just like steadily wane. And what I'm told from American capitalists is that competition is good in the market. So I'm excited to see that in action.
Any response to that, gang? Waning good? Competition for all? Is this what we want to see? Go ahead,
Oh,
Joe. Oh, Joe, then Moon. Go ahead.
Okay,
no
I
problem.
thought I would briefly bring up an important point, I think, which is a lot of people bring up America's massive military spending as kind of a bad thing. And in some regards, it certainly is on their side. But I do think as Europeans, we maybe underappreciate how much America kind of handles that fairly unpleasant aspect of the First World, which is the military, which is the wars, which is the huge amount of weapons spending. So this is why I think we are seeing a lot of European countries which have either previously always been neutral or have generally not had as much military spending beginning to arm up, because they are seeing that if America generally does pull back, they're probably going to have to get their hands dirty in ways they've previously been able to avoid.
Does everyone
ahead,
agree with my definition of Pax Americana, the mooncake? Do you agree with that?
Um, honestly, yes, mostly. I was just going to bring attention to both that European aspect as well, just because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the US spends 3% of their total GDP as it pertains to, I think it's military spending. That also could be how much they fund I believe it's the UN. And then I think a lot of European countries, I think it's only 1% of their GDP. So America does take on a big role of being the main person to look to. And I know people see that as a bad thing, but I also see it as a positive, because if these countries rely on America, they'll probably follow their democratic processes as well. The big thing that concerns me that we're seeing is China's military budget keeps rising and rising. By 2030, it's projected to be 5 times larger than Japan's. And that's going to become a big issue. With that, I also think with the with like the whole, yeah, basically just China becoming the issue, just because since China has an authoritarian government and it's under one party, they're basically showing that they can reach the same amount of money as the U.S. without doing it democratically. And I think that shows other countries that they don't have to follow a democratic process as well. They can just do one party and be like tell their citizens exactly what to do. And I think that's a major issue that we're going to see.
What do you think that is going to be the effect? So I guess I'll ask this to the panel as a whole. Do we see that again, the Armenian situation is coming? There's been reports that Armenia will be invading I can't pronounce the name of this country.
Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan will be invading Armenia, yeah.
Yes.
I did not hear about that.
That's going to be done soon. There are reports that that's also going to be a conflict that opens up. As well as China looking at Taiwan. Are these the result of the waning influence, or is that simply a coincidence? Like back in the Bush era, back in the days where we would go in militarily and bomb countries for 20 years, we saw conflict, but not on this scale, right? Not to this degree. And do you disagree, Prime?
Completely disagree. Like we've always
Okay.
said, like people always. This is like a general thing of like the present being more salient than the past, right? So we'll say like yeah, like these conflicts have never been this bad. No, they were terrible before, right? During that time and the time before, we've always had these different conflicts simmering. And Pax Americana was never that like conflicts didn't happen. Is that we played a part in shaping them, right? And so I think that like our interference into these different conflicts has like you brought up Afghanistan and like Iraq. That is an example of when our power waned, right? That we used our power unwisely, and because of that, we caused massive conflicts in those areas that we sought to help or whatever, and a massive destabilization. And the world has seen that we can't like get the situation under control. So I think that undermines us.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to jump in, I would definitely agree with that. Oh, sorry. I know.
Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought someone else was jumping in. No,
Don't be
I was
polite,
going to.
just go. Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to say, I just agree with that quite a bit. I think the biggest mistake America may have made was staying in Afghanistan for as long as they did, because I think over those years, it basically showed the rest of the world that they couldn't get their job done. 20 years, you didn't even do anything. Taliban's still an issue. You were fighting wars you probably shouldn't really have been involved in for that amount of time. I forget the name of a previous U.S. defense minister that mentioned this as well. I think when Obama chose not to go into Syria, that was another part of the issue. And for a really long time, people tried to say America wasn't losing its influence. But as we've seen with, once again, the invasion of Ukraine, China having all those ships in the South China Sea, basically harassing Taiwan, I think a lot of countries don't exactly care anymore. America was this big leader after 1945. That's when we had the quote unquote international peace. People looked to America for the answers, the help, but people aren't doing that anymore, or I should say, countries aren't doing that anymore. We're starting to see them do things on their own.
Should
And I think
Obama
that's
have
big.
gone into Syria?
Yeah, that was my
Um,
question. But because Mooncake, like, I would at some point in time I would have said the same thing, right? But
Yeah.
I also jumped on the Libya bandwagon. I said like, well, yeah, these people are going to, Muammar Gaddafi was going to slaughter these individuals, and so America has to step in, and that was an incredible ongoing moving disaster. So like, should we have directly jumped into Syria? I don't know.
Okay.
uh,
Mind if I just jump in here for a sec?
yeah.
Okay, on conflict, I think yes, we are generally not as bad as we've been in the past. Although I would say the Russia-Ukraine thing is something shockingly new. But yes, I believe otherwise it's safe to say we aren't in some terrible hell place. It's sort of business as usual. When it comes to Syria and Libya, I'm not going to give a stance because I don't think I'm qualified to. I'm not sure. But what I do think we have, and I think what sort of came from Iraq and Afghanistan, is a kind of cynicism where we not understandably just see these images, like if you've been following the Palestinian and Israel stuff, like on my timeline on Twitter, I've already seen a picture of someone urinating on two naked bodies, and we just see all this stuff, aren't actually sure where to side. Everything seems awful, and we kind of go, oh dear, what do we do? Oh dear. And at that point, I think it's very easy to just want to shut it off and not take any involvement, which in some cases should probably be the approach. But I do think when you go for this pacifist approach, you ultimately do end up siding with whoever the more powerful winning side is. And well, I don't want to say that means it's always the wrong one. I just want to sort of acknowledge that you won't get criticised for not intervening in a way you will for intervening when it goes badly.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's something to be said about there's both the capacity to act and have people follow you, and the will for your people to do that, and also the kind of like reflex to do that. So I'm glad that the American reflex to war has waned. I'm not glad that our capacity to influence and have people follow has waned, or that it waned because of us simply. So the fact that it was unfeasible for us to go into Syria because we were still in Afghanistan and because we'd looked so bad in Afghanistan for so long, that's like the worst reason. I would love for America to become more moral, but also to be able to act. Yeah.
I think, first I want to see if Alucard had something to say. I don't know if you're raising your hand. You got to use your alpha hand.
All right,
Like
all right, let's go.
This, like, here's a finger that I can barely see. It's not going to cut it.
Yeah, I don't want to be too aggressive. You know what I mean? not like America, you
aggressive.
know what I'm
Okay.
saying? Yeah.
But go on.
But yeah, so I don't think that like the Afghanistan, Syria, Libya situations were like necessarily evidence of declining capacity per se. I think it's just that all of America's sort of regime change slash state building attempts recently have backfired immensely. We just kind of we didn't really have a good idea of what we wanted to do, and more importantly, we kind of the American public just didn't have the commitment. It's sort of people call like Afghanistan like a forever war, like 20 years wasted and whatnot. But if you look at sort of America's historic successes in terms of state building, it actually took longer than 20 years. Where we look at Japan, we look at South Korea, we look at Taiwan, arguably, some of the best countries on earth, immense successes. Those took like 40 years each, more or less. So it's actually just kind of, I think, as I said, number one is that the issues that like we just for instance in Iraq they just had some very bad ideas, and they broadly did not know how to rebuild Iraq. But it's also that the American public just isn't really willing to let that slide anymore. They don't want American soldiers to be deployed somewhere for 50 years straight in sort of significant quantities. But also, I guess, to go back,
Oh,
or I guess if you want to jump in, Mooncake, I'd be glad to.
oh, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess I wanted to also go back to sort of Wick's original question way at the start of all of this, sort of, are all of these ongoing conflicts evidence of the decline of Pax Americana? And I just want to go through them one by one. So let's do Taiwan, China. That's a 70-year-old frozen conflict. Let's do Israel, Palestine. That is also a 70-year-old not so frozen conflict. Then we can go to Armenia, Azerbaijan. That's a frozen conflict from the 90s. And that one is, I think, pretty obviously occurring not because of the decline of Pax Americana, but because Russia chose to destroy itself in Ukraine. And then Ukraine, Russia, that is sort of the only not truly novel conflict, because we haven't had anything this big going on in Europe since World War II, really. Obviously, the fall of Yugoslavia was a little weird, but it wasn't like this. But even that one, so if we look at the way it has gone, America has only gained from it in relative terms, because once again, Russia's military is is a complete wreck now. Literally, they've wiped out their land forces. I mean, yeah, pretty significantly. So that's kind of my opinion on why I don't think these conflicts in
Do
particular
you
are
think?
evidence of the decline of the Pax Americana.
Yeah, I'll ask you directly then. Do you think that if an outbreak that we morally should and are currently capable of intervening in occurs, right? Do you think the American public would support it at this point? Because I worry, right, that after Afghanistan, after Iraq, that we've kind of done this overcorrection where we saw the failures of those policies and we thought, whoa, that was really bad. And so we have become too gun shy about maybe being willing to get involved in things that we absolutely should get involved. We have a current sizable sector of one of the parties in America who wants to just stop funding Ukraine entirely, right?
Mhm.
We have these groups who are becoming more and more isolationist, and they'll point to Iraq, they'll point to Afghanistan, they'll point to these failed policies and these failed wars and say, see, this is what happens. But I worry, my concern is that is going to make us kind of like you talked about reflex. Instead of reflexively going in, we're going to just do the opposite problem, which is reflexively shy away, and that's going to be an issue, right?
Yeah, I do think there's a stronger isolationist trend overall in the U.S. than, I'm not that old, but what I would imagine probably since before World War II. I don't know if it was like, if it's kind of at its high point, um, and I think, yeah, I do think it is a problem if first of all, for a state in general to be obsessed with security and nothing else, which is where it feels like a United States with a security budget, a military budget that keeps increasing, but isn't getting involved in conflicts directly and just wants to kind of be a porcupine. And it feels like even our Israeli policy is almost just related to security. Obviously, we weren't going to get involved boots on the ground in Ukraine because they're fighting Russia, and we don't want to be actually shooting at Russian tanks because that could spark something big. So I don't know if we can judge too much based on that.
Um,
Um, yeah.
Sorry. Well, just to kind of go off of that, um, when it comes to the budget of the US, and once again, as I live in Canada, it's also very important to me because we do have to, in a way, appreciate the spending of the US. I do understand that it is costly. They spend the most out of any, honestly, country on this planet. Uh, but I think so many of us rely on the US for that fact, right? No matter what happens, they're the ones with the biggest budget. We need them to be the superpower. They're supposed to, especially after 1945, the US was founded on its democratic and fast forward ideas, right? They were like one of the big countries to show, like, this is what society should look like. Capitalism, every individual for themselves, right? So we were moving in this democratic way, and we wanted other countries to model that basically after the US. Um, so just yeah, to touch on that, I just want to also go back to the Syria thing. So I do agree that if Obama had gone in at that time, there could have been quite a lot of miscalculations. But I think part of my issue was you already had this losing war, which I do agree, in Afghanistan, but then to not go into Syria and have 400,000 lives cost because of that, when he was arming people in Syria at the time, he just wasn't doing strikes or anything. I think it kind of showed other countries like North Korea, Iran, oh, the US really isn't going to touch this. We could probably go farther because the US doesn't want to get involved. And I think that's when we also started to see the influence of the US go down, right? I know everyone's thinking, well, we don't want all these wars, we don't want giant wars. But if you're going to be that major superpower and you're going to be the face of a free democratic society, you do have to take up the responsibility of helping other countries. And I do think it's kind of a uh,
America's
cost
military
benefit.
protects your free healthcare. But yes,
Uh,
go ahead.
Exactly.
I have, oh God, I want to reply to all of you because I have big problems.
Yes,
All right,
same.
one at a time. First to Wick, the bane of my existence. Republicans, I think. Yeah, I think you said something about like how Republicans don't want to fund the wars, right? That's what you're alluding
There's the
to.
segment of the Republican Party that's becoming more and more isolationist. Yes.
So I would say that of the Republican constituency, yes, but Republican politicians, I think, have all the incentives are there for them to fund the defense industry. I don't think anything has actually changed there, except that they're responding to that constituency. But I just want to say that because there's a difference, right? There's a difference between what the voters want and what the incentives are for like America's leadership. And so those incentives are still the same. And I believe that the isolationist Republican base can be shifted if necessary. So I'll just put that out there. In terms of what our friend Alucard said previously, he talked about how Russia's uh, um, questionable success in Ukraine has been. And an example of Pax Americana not waning, I don't see how that works. One, Pax Americana isn't just like our name is in the title, but it's not just us, right? The way this world order works is that it's a collection of like the stronger economies working together to impose their will, led by the U.S. And so I don't think we should look at it as like a unipolar uh, leadership, right? Instead, we should look to groups, right? Like, so we operate through NATO, is how America exerts its will. Then I think we should compare it to like BRICS, which is up and coming. The fact that that is getting so much traction, they just let in more countries. I think that's where we should look at rather than like the individual nation of Russia, which has like a tiny economy compared to like its military spending and all that. So I'll put that out there. Lastly, to our friend Mooncake here, I like again, Syria is such a tough question, and like you saying like, well, America should have gotten involved, but like, what does that involvement look like? And what does like helping another country mean, right? Because in this case, would have been knocking over the dictatorship, right? We've been knocking that over. Is that helping the country, right? What if we helped him? And I don't think he would like Bashar al-Assad as a good person, right? What if we helped them stabilize this country, right? Like quell the uprising and then maybe provide resources so the uprising doesn't happen again. Like, what does that look like?
I
Yeah, go
mean,
ahead.
oh, sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say, I guess what I mean is, and I know it is a very complicated topic, so it's not as easy as, okay, just send in a bunch of soldiers. I do acknowledge that that's not exactly the best idea because of what was happening. But I do think airstrikes. I just think the fact that they were also using, what's the word? Sorry, like gas,
Yes, yeah.
gas weapons,
Chemical
things like
weapons?
Sarin
that.
gas?
Yeah,
Was it
sorry.
sarin?
Thank you. Yeah, chemical weapons during this is very, very concerning. We let almost 500,000 people be murdered, and we basically watched it happen. And I understand we had an issue going on already. But once again, if you're going to be that face of a free democratic society, you're going to be the biggest military spending. I do believe you have a responsibility to the rest of the world. I do
Then
believe there were ways. Oh, sorry.
just real quick, because in that note, do you think we should be directly involving ourselves in the Israeli-Pakistan conflict by that same
Palestine.
sorry, Palestine.
Wick's got
Sorry,
some news that.
Israeli-Palestine
Yeah,
conflict.
yeah,
It's like, oh
wrong
shit.
country, Pato.
No,
So
sorry.
if
I'm not willing that into the existence, please.
Let's
Please,
hope
the
not.
universe, don't listen to me.
I was
But
like, oh fuck.
the Israeli-Palestine conflict, some would argue, is we're watching people just get murdered, right? So should, by that logic, we step in, if that's your stance?
honestly, in my opinion, yes, I do believe all like even Canada, I do
On
believe as
which
well should
side?
step. Um, see now this is where we start to get a little complicated. I think the big issue is what's happening now is going to have an effect for generations. That's like that's just it, period. There's going to be long-term detrimental effects. What Hamas did, unspeakable acts, right? The same thing that Israel is doing as well now, killing Palestinian citizens, horrendous acts. I think at this point, a government needs to step in, that being probably the US, to mitigate loss on all sides. Personally, that's what I believe. I know it's obviously harder. It's easier to say than to do. But yeah, I do
But
believe we should be involved.
but this is an example of like why I disagree with your description before that America
Yeah.
is like the face of like a free democratic society. That like that's what it represents to the world. I mean, I think maybe in some people's minds, yeah, but how it has actually acted has not been on the side of democracy. No, we will work with any autocracy. In fact, we prefer those autocracies if they get on the bandwagon of American capitalism. Like that's the thing. That's how we
Yeah,
operate.
but
And
if we're
so it,
being honest, oh,
No, don't
well,
let him talk over you. Go ahead. Tell him.
no,
If
oh,
we're
okay,
being honest,
respond.
if
Okay,
we're
go ahead.
being honest, if we're being like yeah, completely real, the US has presented itself as the face of democracy. What's the American dream? Everybody wants to go to the US, they want to make some money. You can come here and do this, right?
That's a
You're
myth.
free, you can vote. No, let's be real. You guys
That's a
have
myth.
billionaires, tons of no, that's not a myth. If
A
I went to
billion.
the US, if I went to the US today and I actually want to start a business or you can do it. You
You do
have
you
a
want
free society.
do you want yeah,
Yes.
hold on. You can do
Some
that
of
in
the
Canada
best
too. But you
doctors,
can do that
no, but
you can do that in Canada
no,
too. And
yes,
billionaires,
yes,
but you mentioned billionaires as if that's a measure of American freedom. Absolutely not. That's like the
but
opposite of what
it
that
is.
is. And no, it's
No,
not.
but it
No, it's
also
not.
is because
And that's
capitalism.
part of the myth making. That's part of the myth making
Oh my gosh.
because American capitalism, part of how it works is the myth that you can become a billionaire. That anyone with a little enough grit and a
But you
moxie can
can.
become a. No,
But
you
you
can't.
can.
That's foundationally wrong. That's
So
absolutely
you're
foundationally wrong. I can
so
argue
you're
that later.
telling
I'm
me.
taking up too much time,
Oh,
but like that's
okay.
foundationally wrong.
Okay, fine. Sorry, I'm sorry, guys. You can't become a billionaire. You can maybe become a millionaire, but you still get a choice. If you go to the US, if you go to Canada, you go to a European country, you have more rights than a lot of other countries on this planet. And you
That's a
have to
separate
acknowledge that.
conversation. Why? That's a separate conversation. Don't
I'm
mix those two
talking.
up. Don't mix those two together, right? Because what you're talking about is one is the economic possibilities, right? Like how far can you reach? How far above your starting socioeconomic class can you reach? That's one thing. Separately is the amount of rights that you have, right? And yes,
What's your definition? I'm sorry. What's your definition of a free democratic society?
a free democratic society.
Who's the face, in your opinion?
I'm sorry. Would you say Whick in
Who's
here?
the face of a free democratic? If not the
Yeah,
U.S.,
yeah.
then who is the
Then
face?
who is?
I don't know
Maybe
if you
Germany?
okay. Yeah, either Germany or fucking Norway, Finland, I guess, whatever, right? But like they're not in the position to like run hegemony, right? Like I think a free democratic. It's less of what's happening in the U.S. I think it's certainly part of it. But like I'm saying that the way the U.S. operates its foreign policy is not in favor of democracy. So you can make all the arguments you want, how America is some shining city on the hill, right? I think it's filled with a lot of garbage. But you can make that argument if you like. But the way we've actually operated within the international stage says otherwise.
So here's the problem that I have with this like discourse is that we can look at everything negative has done bad. That's not a problem. We can talk about what they messed up with foreign policy. We can talk about wars that maybe they shouldn't have been in. But at the end of the day, America is literally one of the freest countries on this planet. You cannot deny that. They are the shining star, what you would look at as a free
That's not
democracy.
what I'm
Why do
talking
you
about,
think
though.
but
Let her
what I'm
finish.
saying
Let
is
her
that
finish, and you can
they're the
reply. Okay, go ahead.
face. They're the face of liberal ideas, forward thinking. If you're gay, you can get married here. So what I'm just saying is,
The
if you are
face of the
going to be
myth.
this a myth,
The
America
face of
has
the
done
myth.
amazing things. The idea that you can't even say America has done good things is insane to me.
Hold
This
on.
is why you have the rise
You
of
are
populism in
you
America.
you're confusing things. You're confusing things again. I didn't say that you can't do great things in America. Did I say that? No. Right? Like you have freedoms in America, right? I acknowledged that previously. Absolutely you do, right? You can comparatively to other places, you got a lot of freedoms. But what I'm talking about is because this conversation isn't one about foreign policy, essentially, right? And America's place within the world and how America operates to the rest of the world. Now, we have built through our culture, right, through our media, we have built a facade that America is like is a benevolent leader that wants what's best for everyone, right? That gives you the talking points that you're spouting at me right now. However, when we actually operate, like we have no problem facilitating massacres and coups, right? And undermining those are very democratic societies that you think that we are the face of, right? When there are democratic uprisings, right, in other countries, America will fund the coup to annihilate that. Like we saw that in where is it? Iran, we saw that in, right? We knocked off those leaders. If we were that face, right, of that democratic society, like which people believe we are, if we were that, we would encourage them and say, yes, we should be able to help your own economy. You should be able to use the resources for yourself. But then we're still going to integrate you within the world economic system for everyone's benefit. We didn't do that. We did it for our benefit. We knocked them over because we want to put our person in place.
I'll let Moon respond, but then we're gonna get Alucard in, Joe in, and if Socrates wants. So Moon respond, and then we'll open it up a little bit.
So sorry, that's a lot to think about and respond to because I don't disagree with a multitude of your points. I guess it's in a way, I guess we may have to end up agreeing to disagree only because personally, even with the issues America has had, the crimes which I will admit they have committed, I still believe they are the face, the ideal of a proper democratic society. And once again, if you're going to be that, a superpower, which America is, even with everything they've done, they should get involved in these things. And that's kind of just where I stand.
Can I just really quickly jump the queue to say that maybe given that America has created this facade, we have a duty both to not destroy or allow that facade to decay, but also to embody that. So we need to become the real America that we have always said we were. But that facade is worth saying this is something to strive for. Maybe that's a point of agreement.
Alucard, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I take Prime's point and that's something that I mentioned in my intro statement. I do agree that America used to engage in some very sus behavior in the past. So, for instance, he brings up the Iran coup. That was in
When did it stop?
1953.
Out of curiosity, what
When
was
did
the
it?
year that America stopped being sus?
I would say.
When
How,
Obama got elected,
no, not no, no,
when he
no.
got the Nobel
I'm
Peace
not.
Prize.
I'm not rocking with Obama that much. Maybe I don't know. It might have been when Trump got elected, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe a little bit later. I think so. As I've said before, like we've dropped some of the kind of most excessive foreign policy tools that we used in the past. We don't really coup people anymore. Especially we don't coup democracies in favor of like strongman autocrats. I mean, if if there is an example that I'm forgetting about, feel free to point it out. But I don't think that's the case anymore. We don't do regime change. We don't do state building. We don't do big occupations. So right now, at this current moment, today, U.S. foreign policy is largely sort of focusing on positive engagements. Or, I mean, I guess we still do sanctions, but generally speaking, so we influence countries with economic incentives, like sanctions or I don't know subsidies, aid, etc. We do security agreements like NATO or like the stuff we have with Korea and Israel, and what else? There was some other pillar that American foreign policy rests on. Oh, arms supplies. So that's the thing that we are doing with Ukraine, what we're about to do with Israel and with Taiwan. So I think as long as America sort of sticks to these three pillars, at least I think America will remain a fairly benevolent hegemon. Now, in some cases, I might advocate for some more aggressive actions, but at the moment, I would say even where we are
Well, I'll ask
today,
you the
I
same
think.
question I asked Moon. Given, right, that we are to be protectors of the world, protectors of the free world, protectors of civilians, innocent lives, as much as able, should we step in directly to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
All right, sure, I can answer that. So, as it stands right now, while it's just Israel and Palestine, frankly, I don't see what we would even do there. Israel has no problem dropping thousands of bombs on Gaza on its own. Its special forces will go in and try to rescue the hostages, smoke out
And
Hamas.
you're
I
for
think
that?
Uh, I'm for some of it. I think maybe they need to chill out with the bombs a little bit. Uh, but and I guess so. Even in that, America has not intervened directly, but it has been sort of a benevolent force insofar as they're slowly dismantling the blockade. They got Israel to turn the water back on in South Gaza. They got Egypt to reopen the border crossing so that at least foreign nationals could evacuate. And I think maybe America got them to sort of postpone the ground invasion of Gaza so that more civilians could evacuate, although it's a little bit unclear with that. But lastly, I'll make one final addendum is that if all of this goes off the rails, if Israel starts its ground operation, and then we have Hezbollah, Iran, a bunch of 14 spin-offs of Al Qaeda all jumping in to attack Israel, then of course I would support America going in. It will be it will be a very bad situation. But in that case, of course, yes, if it grows uh, beyond just Israel and Gaza, I would, in fact, I would strongly support America going in.
Got you.
So just to look directly, because the one kind of military action we've taken is to send an aircraft carrier actually next to Israel, and I think Biden is sending a second one.
There are
Um,
two aircraft groups.
yeah, which I interpret basically as just like, hey, everybody else, like, um, you know, no funny business. We don't want any kind of like larger nations starting to invade. I assume they're not going to like, if Hezbollah ramps up, Biden's not going to make any orders. But if like Iran or somebody obviously went in, then I I hope that doesn't happen. Um, so far, in terms of at an influence and kind of social political level, to my knowledge, Biden has only spoke out about the Hamas attack. He hasn't made any comments about the Israeli retaliation other than basically kind of general support. My position in terms of this is kind of a unique situation for the U.S. to have influence because we give so much money to Israel specifically for defense. So even though the political will in our country is so fucked when it comes to Israel, that this will likely, not happen for a long time. What I would really want to see is American politicians start pressuring for the American defense aid to Israel to be contingent on ending human rights abuses. So right now, be like, hey, you guys got to come to a ceasefire. You've got 10 days. If you don't do it, it's like $1 billion per day that we've taken as ransom that we're not giving you next year. And obviously, for a long-standing time, I would like to see that with respect to settlements, but there's a current crisis right now. So America could have a huge influence without even having to involve anybody else. We're not going to do that because we're deranged when it comes to Israel in America politically. But yeah.
Can I go after Joe?
Sure.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of moved a bit past the point Moon and Prime were shouting about, but it is nice to see some fire. It took a while for the debate to get as nasty as it did on the porn panel you held. I'll say that, although I want to point out that the porn panel got to bringing up the Holocaust way sooner. But to get back to...
Unironically true, but
yes,
go on.
yes. But I thought I'd bring up that to me, I feel like America kind of became a world leader sort of basically after World War II when it came down to East and West, America versus Russia. And what I feel happened there is America made all these alliances with basically any country which would oppose communism strongly. And that's, I feel like, setting out all these alliances, whether you view it all as good or bad, the end result was once communism basically fell apart. I mean, you can debate China as it is now, but what we think of as the Russian power back then, fall of the Berlin Wall, all that stuff, you had all these different alliances America was in, which was purely kind of there to oppose communist power. And now America has all these connections with these different ideologies with very little consistency or allegiance to each other. And with its increased military involvement, I feel this is why we have, to a degree, all this cynicism, because we see the US protecting certain nations and not protecting others. And to a degree, it's really because they have already built this alliance. But it's very hard to see it as sort of a moral, logical
But
reason.
is that bad? So when we talk about like, and I see you, Prime, but I want to address this real quick. Like when we talk about like the world being a world leader and being a world protector, I don't think that means protect every nation. There's some nations that don't deserve protection, right? Like there's some nations
Wait.
who are like, for example, do we think we should protect Russia from Ukraine right now?
Well,
Right? Should we protect Russia from Ukraine? Probably
Hell
not.
no, brother.
Right?
Wait.
Probably not. Okay.
Wick,
There are
just
some
to
like, should we protect China from the Uyghurs? Probably not, right? Probably not. There again, we can forbid human rights abuses. So if a country does cross certain lines, such as targeting civilians and things like that, we can step in then to protect the civilians. But there are some nations, right, that again, it's okay to be an enemy with this nation, right? It's okay. It's probably good, in fact, that we're enemies with nations like Russia. That's probably
Well,
a good thing.
well, the thing.
So yeah, that's just my thought here. You can
Okay.
respond, and I want Prime to go.
Yeah, sure. I'll just briefly respond to that. Is that I wasn't really talking about America being against Russia or China. I mean, those are kind of original communist powers, although you can debate where they are right now when it comes to how they run things. I was thinking more to make a really obvious example, something like Nam or something like that. When it's purely to oppose a communist force. There's a lot of different countries which oppose communism. A capitalist country isn't inherently going to be democratic because it becomes capitalist. It's now I would favour that over straight out communism, but it's not that straightforward. And when you build a lot of alliances, it gets messy when your main enemy, e.g., communism, kind of drops out.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Prime.
Yeah, so I want to respond to our friend Alucard. Um, So you you were implying that America has somehow changed the way it operates in the world, and I heavily disagree. Haiti is a perfect example of this. Haiti has long had American, like from its founding, been a victim of American interference, and in terms of like straight up coups, right, and theft, right. There's that one time where America like invaded Haiti and then took all its gold for safekeeping, right? That was very helpful of them. So Haiti, who recently, you remember, like had a president assassinated through interesting means. But like I believe it was the president before that one, right? There was an election, and that election process was specifically interfered with by America, by Hillary Clinton, through the State Department. She called them up, right? And she let the like this presidential committee that was going through like this administrative process know that if America's preferred candidate was not let in, that there's a possibility of an invasion, right? She threatened them, and then that guy, the preferred candidate, ended up winning. And from there, and now there's going to be another American interference into, or not American, but like world interference, military interference into Haiti to quell the violence, right? And you can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Then there's Brazil. Brazil had been talking about creating its own separate non-dollar backed currency with in coordination with other countries. And then who threatened them? Obama threatened them. Obama let him know, right? He talked to Lula, right, the president at the time. He talked to Lula and let him know, like, there would be consequences if Brazil went down this path. And then we could talk about Afghanistan for the most current example. We lost that war. We left. The Taliban's in charge. And what does the U.S. do? It holds Afghanistan's money, like their money, not like our aid money to them. Their money, it holds them hostage when they're dealing with a litany of crises, not the least of which is the a food crisis, where like a massive percentage of the population is food insecure at this moment. And then, of course, there's the tens of thousands that just died from the earthquakes that happened like a week or two ago. But this is how America operates.
The American earthquakes, right?
The American earthquakes, yes. They died.
Those are Chinese earthquakes. Fake news.
Those are Chinese. But yeah, so I just wanted, like, this, I don't think anything has actually changed. But yeah, you can respond.
Well, wouldn't that be an argument that Pax Americana has not waned? We are still continuing to influence, and because as I understand it, BRICS did not develop that alternative currency. As I understand it, Haiti did elect the preferred candidate. As I understand it, right? Like, we are able to just hold Afghanistan's money. Like, isn't this simply evidence that we may not be using direct military intervention now, but we're just saying no to certain things. We're
wait.
certain things.
Can you clarify the question? Is the question that Pax Americana has no effect on the world, or is that it has a waning effect on the world? Because I was under the impression that we were talking about a waning effect. Okay, well then we could talk. Yeah. Then all those previous examples I gave are examples of it waning. That doesn't mean it has no effect on the world.
Okay. Should I guess,
you
respond
can
back
if you'd like? Yeah, you guys are also. Hold on, before you do. Okay, let's cut this shit out right now. You're like, should I respond? Is it my turn to? Fuck that shit. Just go in there, throw some bows, get like. Don't let Prime intimidate you. Don't let Socrates intimidate you. Just run them over. If you get too much, I will pull you back. And I have the mute power, so I can do that, right? But don't let other people just like bowl you over. But like, maybe I should go.
You guys are all too nice.
No, don't do that shit.
You guys are all too nice.
Just because people take turns on Prime's panels doesn't mean you have to do it here.
All right. So okay, I'll go into it. So I think that the Afghanistan and Brazil examples that you mentioned, I think those sound like sanctions, which was a part of my list, and I would say that it's fine for America.
Brazil wasn't a sanction.
Were we threatening to invade Brazil?
He said, well, from my understanding, this is what Lula related, right? That there would be like possibly military consequences, just like consequences. America would strike back somehow if they had gone through with this. So I don't know exactly what he would have done, but like it
Is that
wasn't simply like a sanctions thing. But the point is that like, but and to separate it from sanctions, I think is itself a problem, right? Because and I fell down this trap as well to think that well, sanctions are the kinder, gentler way of doing things. When people literally die, like they've done studies about like the sanctions on Iran, and what the effects of that had. And there's like excess deaths from like lack of medical supplies. Like those people have died. Economies fall apart. It causes instability, which can cause violence, which takes lives. Right? Like that. The sanctions regime is simply a gentler way of doing things. And so, an example of a benevolent United States, I don't think is actually the case. But
It's an economic warfare rather than
you
military.
do you
It's a
think
boost.
the U.S. doing those things? Do you think it's inherently all bad? Like it's just all bad?
which
I
things
guess for me.
exactly you mean?
Kind of like what you mentioned. So, for example, the thing with Haiti, getting involved with Iran. So the things you were just kind of discussing before. Do you think overall it's just all of it's bad?
Well, us knocking over Iran's democratically elected president, yes, 100%. That was bad. That was awful. That led to the revolutionary to the revolution. With Haiti, all of America's history with Haiti has led it to where it's now at now the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, with disastrous conflicts on the people. Yeah, I think that's pretty horrible. And like the people they put in charge are the ones who are friendly to American capitalism,
But
which
the
tends to
fault of
be.
Haiti is not just on the U.S. though. You can't just put that strictly on the U.S. There are
I
there are European countries involved in that as well.
hundred
With the
percent,
fall
yeah,
of
but they're
Haiti.
part of agreed. But at least now they're part of the Western Alliance. So yeah,
And
part of Pax Americana.
and would you say? And I guess another question would be, would you agree with? I guess the intervention in Haiti now, or would you still be like, that's probably not a good idea? Or do
Yeah,
you think
so
now would be appropriate?
yeah. So that's like I said. What I was trying to allude to is that like that's a gray zone. Like from my understanding of the violence in Haiti, there needs to be some level of intervention. That they need help, but the people themselves, at least, there's been a lot of protesting for people on the ground saying we don't want that. Right? That when the there was the last time they introduced those peacekeepers. They were violent, they raped, they exploited, and they introduced cholera to Haiti. And like, was it 10,000 individuals, if I'm remembering correctly, died of cholera, that a disease previously unknown. And so they're skeptical of another intervention. I don't know what the
But
proper answer
I
is.
guess because after when the U.S. went into what's the name of the country? Oh, when all those soldiers died. Sorry, you guys probably know what I'm talking about.
There's so
You
many.
gotta
There's
narrow
so
it
many
down.
Sorry,
options.
We're all
Narrow it
Somalia,
I mean,
down.
Vietnam, where all those
Afghanistan.
soldiers died.
sorry. Black Hawk Down. It was from
Somalia.
Oh,
there.
Somalia,
Sorry.
yeah.
Somalia. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Somalia.
Somalia.
Sorry, I apologize.
All good.
After the U.S. went into Somalia, and that obviously did not go very well. With what's happening with Haiti now, I do know the U.S. asked Canada to go in. The big issue was, and I do agree with you, Prime, that some people were saying, well, we don't really want intervention, but then you had other people begging for intervention. Right now, Haiti is under the control of gangs, very vicious gangs. They're not just committing it's like major atrocities, sexual violence against kids, anybody in that country, right? They're shooting, killing anybody they can. They're hoarding the food. People are starving to death. And I think at this point, as countries as successful as ours, I do think we owe something to these countries that I do admit we have messed up to go in and fix this. And I understand it is more complicated than just going in and fixing it. However, I do think it is our responsibility, especially as if we're going to keep international peace, which I think Pax Americana is about. I think we have to show that we can't
I,
just. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I no,
I'll let you
but
go ahead.
well, sorry,
Oh, oh,
I
sorry.
didn't mean to
Go
run over you,
ahead.
but like,
No,
I'm
keep
just
finish
yeah,
your
it's too
no.
nice.
point.
But I
No,
agree. But I
I'm.
agree with you.
Hold
But
on.
you're new here, right? And eventually you'll know to like just tell me to go fuck myself.
Okay.
But like look, I said this one is extremely complicated, right? Like, from my perspective, I think there should be military intervention. But is that it? Is that all we have to offer? right? So like you can say that at this moment there is, like anarchy, like the state does not have control of its territory, and I think that's the case in large swaths of the country. And that we need like just armed force to reestablish that. But what happens afterwards? What does Pax Americana decide that, okay, we're gonna do things differently? We're going to inject resources into this nation. We're going to like they said after the earthquake, that big earthquake that happened years ago, a whole bunch of countries promised a whole bunch of resources to Haiti that never fucking showed up. Let's not forget that.
Just real quick, my OBS is being weird. It just cut out for a second. Refresh, gang, it's back. So yeah, if you just saw
Start
that
over?
disconnect, just refresh, gang, and it should be back
Oh.
now. Okay.
Do you need me to start over? or
No,
something? Okay.
with your spiel, yes,
Oh.
so people can understand you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just assume that I'm making sense and I'm right. But I said that I think that the military intervention is probably necessary for this very moment. But what happens after? What can we provide to these people in Haiti? Right? Are we going to give resources, unlike last time during the earthquake when we didn't do that, when we lied about providing those resources and just never materialized? Are we going to help with like the rebuilding of like their infrastructure and their civil society? There's lots of things that we can do that would be fantastic. Are we going to help them design an economy that works for the Haitian people rather than being exploited by Western economies, right? Like there's so many examples of that in Haiti. I like, it would take all night to describe that. Are we going to do any of that? No. We're going to have an intervention, right? We're going to get control under, but that control will inevitably benefit someone that the Western powers agree should be in charge, right? And that an American capitalism like won't be threatened, whatever the result is. So how is that an example of a free democratic system?
It's always gonna benefit somebody, no matter who it is. At this point, what we can
Make it be the Haitian people.
But they can't do it on their own, obviously, from what we can see today. Because if they could, they wouldn't have the issue they're having.
I know
right
exactly.
Now.
So we can do that. We can help them.
So that's what I'm saying. At some point, we have to go in, get rid of obviously these major gangs, right? I know that's easier. Like you could say it, harder to do, but we need to get it done. And then we start to implement a democratic thing. We can let the Haitians take it over, but we do need a country to go in there and set it up.
Yeah, I already agreed with you. I already agreed with you on the military intervention. I'm saying afterwards, will we do any of that? No, we won't.
All right,
Like,
gentlemen.
when you say do any of it,
Folks, may I make an innovative
jump.
proposition? Have you guys heard about colonialism before? No longer will we just bomb the fuck out of a place, park there for 20 years, and then throw it away like a used condom. I am advocating to make Haiti the 51st American state, all right? No longer are these people just going to be random bums that you don't care about. They are now your citizens. Let's go, baby.
That would
face when
force
Haiti becomes
America
a
to
state
take
before
some
Puerto Rico.
responsibility.
Let's actually, I know he's saying it in kind of a meme way, but let's look at this, right? When you make a people, as Prime said, like to benefit the Haitian people, what better than being able to vote in American elections, being able to have access to American resources, being able to have access to American power and protection? As flawed as that is, it's far better than what Haiti has now. So again, let's take this seriously for a minute. Should America go even further than it has and become an expansionist kind of benevolent empire kind of thing? What do you think?
Okay,
Moon,
so
you had your hand, and Socrates.
I'll just jump in quickly because I have a dumb fuck answer, which is I think the best thing about that would be seeing American politicians flying to Haiti to give speeches in broken Creole. I think that would make it all worthwhile. Please go ahead. Moon?
Not all at once.
I'm purposely holding back, guys.
Oh,
Yeah,
Moon. It seemed like you were ready to go.
Well, I was just going to say, technically, because they speak French, it should be a Canadian province, but I won't delve too much into that.
Canadian's already an American subsidiary. Come on, let's. Okay,
you guys don't
Okay,
even
we're not
speak
gonna
real
say-
French, so what the fuck?
Okay, let's just relax. It's real French. Um, no, but kind of like with the Haiti situation, as you kind of mentioned. Uh, sorry, I was coughing earlier. I think there's a con and a benefit to anything that we do, right? We do understand that if the U.S. does go in, they are going to expect something in return. But if any country goes in, they're probably going to expect something in return. I'm not saying it's appropriate for them to take over their entire economy, but maybe if they did want to make it a state, I mean, personally, I think that's a little crazy. I think we should give the country back to them. But I do think it's important to implement a system there. We can send over officials. Um, my big thing is that we just can't stand by and watch, especially when the U.S. is the biggest spender when it comes to military. Why spend the money if you're not going to use it? Why spend the money if you're not going to protect democracy? And I think
Do you really,
that is something we
do
can
you
think
believe
about.
that? Why spend the money if you're not going to use it? That like we want to follow that like logic train. That like okay, well we spent the money, so we're going to
I'm not
use it.
saying, like, here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying go bomb random countries and like just do all of that. But what I'm saying is that if you see a country where there's obviously issues, there is a way to step in. Mass murder, genocide. Why wouldn't you step in? And it is a country that could benefit the U.S. So why wouldn't they want to step in? I think there are pros as to why they should. Not only that, the people of that country would probably be very happy as well. They're going to love America. If not anything, I think a lot of countries like to be loved. They want to be the countries people want to visit, they want to immigrate to. And I think that is an important aspect.
Joe, you had your hand up.
Oh, yes. I was gonna say. I mean, you two get into it a bit, and then I kind of lose my place. But I was gonna say, well, yeah, I come from a country which has a bit of a history of empire building, and which has a bit of a history of that sort of falling apart. So I would say, should America make Haiti the next state? Well, I'm gonna say I'd be very cynical if it decided it was gonna try it, but it would be interesting to see, and it would be nice for states to actually have to take some responsibility for a country as opposed to just parking troops there and like hoping it just kind of works itself out. So it would certainly be a very interesting experiment.
Why
Um,
did
Sir, colonialism gang in the
why
house. Let's go, baby.
So the
I'm
only reason though, hold on, but like this is important. Like, let's talk about. Like, so I think it would be interesting if America, like, made moves in that direction, only because it'd be a mask off situation. Like, yeah, we actually don't give a fuck about your nations. Like our interventions are for our own benefit. So fair enough. But like, let's understand like how like states become states. Like the history of that. Like the history of that is that we send in colonists, right? We can call them settlers, right? Let's just call them settlers. We send them white settlers to these areas,
yeah,
and
immigrants.
when they
Yeah.
yeah, anchor babies, yeah, and when they've reached a certain amount, like a majority, that's when they're eligible to become a state, right? We've done
Yeah,
this
like
with
Mexico's doing with us, sending
with,
immigrants into our
with
state and
indeed,
taking it over. Yeah, yeah.
you
no,
nailed it.
no,
You
Splicing
nailed
us.
it. But like so, and this makes sense. Like if just like how demographics is going to work, you're going to have a native population who's not going to like this, right? Who wants a thing called like autonomy and sovereignty, right? Fuck that. And so you send good Christian white individuals to take over that territory, and then they vote themselves into becoming the state. That's like the pattern throughout American history. And so what that would look like is that we would send again settlers to these neighborhoods, maybe like clear out like the indigenous native population, like arm those settlers to protect themselves
Take their
because that native
jobs. Yeah.
population is going to have a problem with that. And then eventually, after taking over the apparatus of the state, right, like the of the country, then they will vote themselves in to become the 51st state. So great.
This is just honestly, I was memeing a little bit with what I'm saying, but this does sound like if we just replace the words, we use different words. It sounds like a Republican anti-immigration screed, right? Like they're
I,
coming in to take our jobs and outvote us and
Wait,
replace
Okay.
us.
hold
Can I
on,
just
Wick.
bring
Hold
something
on,
up,
sorry, Wick.
JP?
Hold on, one second, Wick. Like, I hope you're not serious about that, right? Because what I was describing, of course, was the Israeli-Palestine situation. I hope you got that. Like, did you
I
get that, or
know.
maybe you didn't?
Yes.
Okay,
So
I wasn't sure.
again, what
Yeah,
is the difference between an immigrant and a colonial settler?
I
when
was gonna say,
when there's actually a policy behind it, right, and a state apparatus that supports the takeover of that territory. Yes, because Mexico isn't actually trying to take over the states, right? South
Well,
America isn't sending a bunch of immigrants with the hope that they change the characteristic of the United States, right? And then South America, Pax South America will rise to the top, right? That's not what's happening. So let's not pretend. Let's not like dabble in those racist talking points, right? Like not even
okay.
memeing.
I just wanted to say, I was gonna have a joke about how Viktor Orban was going to take over the UK by forcing all of Hungary to flee over here, which they are doing en masse. But like Prime, you've kind of ruined it by explaining how immigration policy kind of actually works.
Yeah, so
But
just
Prime ruined it.
so just
Okay.
backing up a little bit to um, what America has to offer other nations. So when we went into Afghanistan, when we went into Iraq, what I feel like we did was like an advertisement for the military industrial complex. We're like, we can blow this shit up so quickly. We didn't have the capabilities for nation building. That wasn't a tool that we had developed that we could bring. What we could bring to Haiti, maybe we can have like, kind of a level of like UN peacekeepers and just try to keep people from like actively killing each other. But what we've demonstrated is that we don't have a lot to offer in terms of real expertise beyond just sending in money, basically, which I think is not a sustainable business model. So I think there's a world in which America dedicates some kind of effort to building an expertise, and maybe that starts with going to some country that there isn't like a massive economic gain. It's not a proxy war, just a genuine humanitarian issue, and saying, okay, let's build some expertise in helping this country
Which
recover
nation
and
do
gain
you
autonomy. And just to finish
you
that up,
suggest?
there's well, I mean, I think Haiti could be a candidate, but just to say you might have a very cynical point of view where you say, okay, well, military, it's for like fighting shit, or maybe we want to take shit over. What good does it do us to have the expertise in nation building? I think it's like it's a form of power that America has neglected to really like build bridges. Like we haven't. If someone can offer a counterexample, let me know. China's building Belt and roads. I don't know what the belt means. Somebody can inform me. I know what roads are, but I'm not saying we even have to build it up like a colony in that way, but to show the world that we have something to offer beyond just knocking things down.
But
I think that's valuable.
Here's the question, though. Oh, sorry, Mooncake, you want to go first?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, just to kind of go off that point, is like, and not to talk too much about Haiti, but it just is that instead of just thinking it's colonialism, the idea that if a country could go in and set up a system, and now I'm not saying it has to be a perfect system or needs to reflect directly like we would see here or in the U.S., but to set up a sort of system and then let the people take it over. I think that those are the first steps to show, okay, goodwill. We're going to help this country out, and also it does build ties, important ties. I just think if we watch it all happen, we're also complacent in it. When that starts to happen, countries look at us and be like, well, they're not
Complicit
going
or
to get involved.
complacent?
Sorry, say it again.
Complicit or complacent? I'm just trying to.
Oh, sorry,
understand.
like complacent. I think that's the word I was using.
Complacent means
Sorry.
we don't care. Complicit means we're responsible.
Oh, complicit then. Sorry, I used the wrong word.
All
Oh my
good.
gosh, that's
I just
embarrassing.
wanted to clarify.
No, thank you. No, but yeah, just to say that, I just think that if we continue to stand by, people are gonna look at us as basically, what's the word? Like a lack of, I guess, a lack in power, a lack in influence. And I think we have to be very, very careful with that, especially with what we see with China and Japan. Japan's also kind of freaked out. I know they're talking to the U.S. about buying potential nuclear weapons because of China's dominance in the South China Sea. I just think those are important things to consider, and the
But
U.S. really should act these ways. Sorry,
But
go ahead.
Mooncake, you don't have to apologize to me at all.
I know I do that all the time. Oh my gosh, I'll
You're
work
a
on it.
Canadian. You're
So
Canadian.
sorry.
But but uh, like again, I have to ask, like, what does that actually mean to assist, right? Like, if the U.S. doesn't do a thing, right, then the U.S. the rest of the world will look at us as a lame duck. Maybe is what we're reaching for.
I mean,
And go ahead.
oh, and that's kind of why initially I had brought up the Syria situation, which I acknowledged is there are complications. It's just because a lot of countries look at us, sorry, well, look at you guys first, right? And then Canada. The reason I say us is just because we do everything together at this point. But yeah, a lot of countries look at the U.S. first for everything, no matter what it is. And I think when you are a country that big and everybody is looking at you, you have to take certain actions, because if you don't, they're going to question why you're not taking certain actions. Like I said, you have this huge budget. You have all of these bases all over the world. You should really be involved in some of these major incidents. I'm not saying all of them, but a majority of them
How
I
do we
would understand.
decide?
But here's the thing, though. Sorry, I just wanted.
Yeah.
I don't. This is like dovetails to what I wanted to say to our friend Socrates here. Right, Socrates says that we should build expertise, um, in nation building, and like benevolent nation building, basically, right? But is that even possible? Right. So Mooncake asked us to have these interventions somehow, right? And to be clear, I'm not a isolationist, right? So maybe you might have gotten that from what I've said previously, but I'm not an isolationist. I do think America has a place in the world to do something that is helpful. But like sussing out what that is extremely important, right? We have to do that before we do anything, right? What does that actually look like? And I want to know, like the question I want to ask is it even possible for a capitalist hegemony to be a benevolent overseer, right? Because the basis of it is exploiting resources, right? And those resources include land, water, air, humans. That's the basis, and then that informs all decisions, right? As we can see, we have a democracy, but that democracy is heavily informed by the economic system that undergirds it, and our foreign
I
policy is informed by that, and we've seen that throughout time. So, like, is it
I
even possible?
understand.
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, but my big problem is if they don't do it, who will? At some point, if we're being honest, another country will help them. That country could end up being China. As we've seen, China has started making some very large moves. They are trying to connect with a lot of countries. Right now, for example, if you go to a country like Jamaica, right? Very small country, who built the highways there? China. Jamaica owes China forever. They owe them a lot of stuff. So what I'm saying is if you already have a country that big, going into these smaller countries and already doing it themselves, wouldn't we rather it be, Canada or the US? What I'm just saying is that I feel like the US should do it first because someone's going to at
I've,
some
I've,
point.
I've, but I've already answered this, right? I've already said that I prefer American intervention, an American. I prefer an American-led world, right? I think that we have the tools within our nation to like. I'm hopeful for America, so I think we can change our society, right? We can change the instance. I think that's a possibility, but before that, we have to have this conversation because what will happen is that there's going to be an emergency somewhere in the world. America is going to, following Mooncake's doctrine, they're going to interfere, right? They're going to step in, and their initial reflex is going to be to use military power, right, or possibly a sanctions regime. But like, to what goal? To what outcome? right? Who do we help within this conflict, right? When there's different parties who can't get along, who do we initially help? Who do we ignore? And when does it end? All those things matter. But you can just keep saying, well, America needs to do a thing, right? Or China is going to do a thing. But
I
like,
don't think it
what
ever
that
ends,
thing is matters.
but I think that's important, and I know it's easy just to go over, but I think that is the most important aspect. Like
Okay,
with the Israel,
Is it most important that we
Just real
interfere or that
I
we
think this question
accomplish
might kind
something?
of, because I'm curious what everyone thinks of this question. I'm curious. I want everyone to answer this briefly if you can, longer if you need. Uh, I think we've all said that at a certain point we should go in, right? Like America should intervene, even militarily. I think we could all agree that there is a point where that should happen, that we think that would be the moral thing to do as well as the strategic thing to do. My question for all of you is, where is that point? At what point do you give the green light, regardless of the exploitative nature of capitalism, right? That we say, okay, not doing nothing is not an option anymore. We have to go in, flawed as we are. Prime, I want to hear your answer first. I want to hear everyone answer. But yeah, then at what point?
That we go in.
Yep, that we go in, guns blazing, bombs dropping, no fucks given. We show the world why we don't have free healthcare in America. Okay, we show them exactly and demonstrate to them why we don't have free healthcare. At what point do we do that?
Like, I mean, I could just agree with what everyone else is gonna say, right? Like, if there's some massive loss of life that's happening, right? If a genocide, that's what everyone at least is going to start with that on their list, right? So sure, I can agree with that. I'm saying that like, what happens afterwards? To what end? Do we walk? It's like, so we come in and we bomb the shit out of them, as our friend Wick would like to do, right? Showing America doesn't fuck around. Great. What happens the day afterwards, right? As the craters are cooling, right? What
Then
does
the other
America
bad
do?
guys in the world think fucking twice. That's
Yeah,
what happens.
but
We
what
make
state
an
do
It should
we?
be
example.
American bombs, is what you're saying, Wick.
Yes.
But what state do we leave that country in?
American
Right? Like, do
craters.
we? American crater. Do we leave? Do we leave? Is it like a Libya situation? And this is like one of the reasons I'm very skeptical, because I was one of the ones, like I said previously, who was in favor of going into Libya. Right? Like Obama convinced me, we got to do it. We got to go in. And then we did go in. And now, currently, there's old school, modern day slavery happening in Libya. That's just a thing that happens there now, right? There are slave markets where people are traded back and forth. When there's like a flow of immigrants from other African nations, like trying to go to Europe, you're aware of that, right? As they're going up, there's Libyan slave traders who grab them and put them into markets. That's the thing that happens because of what we did. So what? Tell me, Wick. What happens after that? That matters.
It absolutely does matter, but to do this kind of Xenos arrow thing where we're like, well, before we get to that point, we have to consider how we get to half that point, and before we do that, we have to consider how we get to half that. Like we can fix these problems, but doing nothing is not a solution, because as bad as it is in Libya, had we not gone in, would it not be worse? I do not know, right? Like,
I'm
Oh,
dubious, but
Prime, just no, you're kind of like cutting in and out.
oh
oh,
yeah,
well, but I want to get other people in too. I want to give Alucard a chance. I want to give Moon, Joe,
All right,
and Socrates. Go
I
ahead.
can go ahead if nobody else wants to jump in ahead of me.
Just
Um,
go. Just go.
all right. So I think, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily even look at whatever, crazy event might be going down anyway. I'll just say, hey, America should go in wherever we can get a good return on what we're doing. So like in Ukraine, obviously, uh, we are investing sort of relatively abnormal amounts of money for this historic time period, but we're getting great return on it. And at the same time, for instance, on the different end of this, we have the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, where for America to intervene directly, it would require sort of putting ourselves through a ton of hoops, and it's not. Yeah, it would just be insanely difficult, like 100 times more difficult than it is, sort of as is the case in Ukraine. So I would just say look out for your own interests and not just sort of short-term interests, but kind of how much value do you place on things like territorial integrity, sovereignty, human rights, etc. So you can look at that and decide, okay, this is what sort of my long-term vision of the world is like, and just base your strategy on that. If you don't want countries to go to war over territory anymore, when someone invades and tries to do a land grab, you bomb the fuck out of them. When if you care about human rights, then I mean, we obviously don't care about human rights, but if you want to do that, then accordingly, someone tries to ban gay marriage, all right, smoke these fools. But so that's kind of
The
what
gays
I'm saying.
will be married, or you will be
Yeah.
bombed.
I
Yeah,
think you're gonna be bombing a lot of countries.
yes, sir. State mandated homosexuality, baby.
Wait,
That's
so
what
Right.
I'm talking about.
wait, so Alucard, I just want to give you a chance to clarify. When you say good return, are you talking about in terms of like the tools that America has to offer, we can make a meaningful impact, or are you talking about in terms of like, is there oil there, that kind of
I'm
return?
talking in terms of power, so it's
Okay.
not. It doesn't have to be oil. It can
But
be a lot of other
but you're
things. But
talking
so,
about return in American hegemony, or
yeah, pretty
okay.
much.
Are you talking about capital investment or
Capital investment, sure, that can be it
so?
too. You got to
That's
keep the world economy
It's
chugging
exactly what
along.
I was saying, right? Can a capitalist hegemony actually be benevolent, right? Because the
I wanted
incentives
to
are
get
going
in
to be
on
what he's
that.
talking about.
I'm super embarrassed. I forgot to announce this was going on in my Discord. I was wondering where everyone was. Like, I only got like 50 on YouTube, and I
Oh,
don't know how many.
jeez.
I was like,
Wick,
why
you don't
don't
have
my
a
listeners
bot?
here?
Yeah, I said
I
I'd
don't have
eat
a
raw
bot.
eggs on here if you
Sorry.
needed attention.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. But no,
Um,
All right.
let me do that announcement real quick so everyone knows I'm actually live. But yeah.
Okay.
$5
Okay.
for fondue. Thank
All
you.
right.
Now that I've
Let me.
announced it.
Okay.
What
Is it
ends would
okay?
Prime prefer America prioritize when it comes to geopolitics? What ends? And thank you for the gift sub, No Pants Kyle.
Okay.
And I think
sorry, can you
Joe
repeat
had
that? I didn't hear
wanted to
that.
talk to this also.
Oh yeah. But that is a question that they paid me to ask, and so I am asking it because if you give me money, I will let you skip the line. What ends would Prime prefer America prioritize when it comes to geopolitics?
Yeah.
If not America's interests, then who?
The interests of that nation could be
Yeah.
up there.
Self-sufficiency, right? Like we can have a policy that
Self-determination.
So when
rising hold on that rising tides lift all boats. That we can say that we that the best way to ensure all those other things, right, that people might have mentioned, like humanitarian needs, and like food security, right? The best way to do that is to make sure that these countries are self sufficient. How do they do that? By having access to their own resources, be able to use it for the benefit of their own people, and understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that that country will be our friends afterwards.
sure you
And
give
that's not the
but let's walk let's walk down this line of thinking. You give Haiti autonomy. You come in, you clear out the gangs, you fix it up, you rebuild the economy, you rebuild the infrastructure, you do what you need to do. It's a period of years. You give them autonomy, and they're like, okay, we're going to throw gays off the roofs now. We are going to do that. That's what we voted on. 80% of us wants to see this. We're not going to let gays get married, and we're going to make being gay illegal with the punishment of death. Is that something we accept, even though it's their autonomy?
Well, so what's the alternative? We bomb them? Was that the
Smoke these fools. Yeah.
Well, that is a question. Like, do we, because it is their autonomy, let them grossly violate their own constituents?
well, we let them vote. Yeah, that's what that means. Yeah.
Let's consider who's voting.
You go first, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, let's consider who's voting and how those systems are working, because when you look at some of these voter turnouts, while I doubt the culture is exactly great, I do get suspicious because it's not uncommon to see countries with shockingly low, like America's turnout isn't great, but some of these other places, like tiny. So I would look at the culture before we necessarily say that, oh, there's no way they can change from this. But yeah, I would say probably. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure, I'll take over. So, I think, um, I mean, it kind of depends on like how much it would take to, shall we say, replace that political system. But really, most likely I wouldn't do anything. I would just open up the asylum program for the local gays, I guess. I would just tell them like, yo, come over here. You ain't
Yeah,
gonna get nowhere with these fools. So
I'd be on the sanctions
that's
side
what I would
also.
do. And I guess just generally speaking, as far as I guess my program for American world building, I guess, is pretty much what I outlined earlier. Just go hard on the sort of economic incentives, military aid, maybe sanctions. But as far as direct interventions go, I mean, I think I'm pretty hardcore on this. If there is like a very specific target that you need to eliminate, it's whatever. But if you want to do like a full blown ground invasion or occupation, I'm I'm going hard on this. All right, you either gotta annex that thing fully. All right, make it a state. We got Haiti, we got Iraq. Let's go. We do. I don't know. We'll get ourselves an Afghanistani George Bush or whatever, or you gotta not do that at all. So that's my
Okay.
opinion.
I wanted to quickly speak, and I brought up Orban earlier, and I think this is a point in favour of immigration because when you look at what's happening with Hungary, it's basically experiencing massive brain drain. Like, young people are getting the fuck out of there where they can, which is why a lot of them are coming over here, which means countries which do tend to follow this ultra conservatism, when there is an option, people will get out, and that will lead to that country basically becoming weaker and weaker. Orban is pretty much a welfare queen to the EU. He constantly bitches and complains about them, but he constantly goes there for handouts. And I would say that is a very good benefit of having power, soft power over a country, in order to try and ensure they sort of go in the direction culturally you want.
Yeah,
I want to
there's
ask Socrates this before we go on too much further. Because again, there are times when you would agree that America should intervene. Um, do you think that we should enforce a ceasefire with Israel and Palestine? And if say we try your initial strategy, we're going to withhold our billions, right? We're going to just stop giving you money. And they're like, that's fine. We don't need it. We don't care. We need to do this. Hamas needs to go. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. At what point, if any, do you think America should go in and say no and just stop them?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really hard for the Western world and for America especially to look objectively at Israel and look at it kind of the way we would look at any other country. First of all, I think we haven't even really tried to start even move a little bit in that direction, because we've basically said, okay, Hamas attacked you, do whatever the fuck you want. As far as I'm aware, there's no real American political outcry from elected representatives. There's like on the streets, but from politicians saying like, hey, maybe don't bomb around hospitals, stuff like that. I think we should start by We should start by just actually starting to do that. Say, hey, let's have a ceasefire. Hey, don't do war crimes. And then we can escalate to say, hey, we've actually got some leverage. We can start to say, hey, maybe we take our aircraft carrier groups home. At a certain level, I think there has to be some amount of consistency, which is that if one country is killing a huge number of non-combatants, then either the U.S. as Pax Americana, whatever we're talking about, or perhaps as a UN peacekeeping force, as has gone into Israel before. I think when Israel controlled the Sinai Peninsula, and there was like some fighting back and forth between Israel and Egypt. They were in there trying to de-escalate things, and they eventually actually got a pretty good relationship between Israel and Egypt by Israel giving the Sinai Peninsula back. So it doesn't even have to be America. It could be the UN as some kind of like joint effort, and then it doesn't look so bad for every American politician who wants to get reelected. But yeah, I think we are reaching that point where Israel is saying, okay, so they turned on like a little bit of water somewhere in the south, they say, but Gazans say that they aren't getting it actually,
Yeah.
and they still don't have electricity to pump water, and they don't have fuel for power, and they're blockaded, so they don't have medicine, and the hospitals are like running out of everything. At a certain point, if all of the world wants to send an aid and a country is bombing civilians and preventing aid from getting in, there has to be some escalation toward making sure that aid gets in. I think it's a moral duty. Whether we're likely to do that, I don't think it's so likely. But I think we, at an objective, like moral level, yeah, we do have to do that.
Socrates, we can hear every time you tap the desk.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, don't worry, no worries.
Just dramatic.
So, like, I just don't. And again, I think you guys have like not actually answered this question. I'm going to ask it again, right? Like, how can we become a benevolent ruler if we have a capitalist system that's based on exploitation? So, like, you guys. So, our friend Alucard here brings up, like, let's make them a state, right? Let's just make Haiti a state. It'll be better off for them. But like, does America want Haiti to be better off? Right? You haven't even answered that question in the first place, because like America is getting benefits from Haiti as it always has, as it is right now. Right? American capitalism is in Haiti. Haiti has a big textile industry that services American corporations, and they wanted a candidate, like I told you in interference before, that would be friendly to those American corporations. Right? So you get your fucking Banana Republic shirts. Like that's what happened. And of course there's the tourism industry where those cruise ships, right? That you all like to go to. You go to a fancy country while you're like drinking on a boat. Those cruise ships, they have like taken over the beaches, like the beautiful beaches of Haiti, right? There are no private beaches where those wealthy white tourists can come and enjoy themselves. But if a black Haitian goes on that beach, there's going to be a fucking problem. So why would we make them a state? Why does America want Haiti to be in a better position, to be able to advocate for itself when it can exploit capitalistically right now?
Okay, can I just ask a quick question? So when you talk about exploiting capitalistic, is the implication that the alternative here is like a socialist international system?
It's actually not what I'm doing, right? So it can be, right? That can be a different system, right? But I'm saying that if there is no alternative, let's say capitalism is the only way, right? Like in that world, can we expect different outcomes?
Okay.
Do you understand what I mean? Was that confusing?
A little bit, yeah. Different outcomes, like how different?
Different outcomes in that outcomes that benefit the country that's being intervened with, right? Like where they end up in a much better spot than they were before because the incentives are aligned in such a way that, like the hegemon, the U.S. in this case, intervenes in a way that is overall beneficial for the vast majority of its people.
Mind if I jump in and talk briefly about?
Someone answer him because I have an answer, but I'm not on this channel.
My hand
I
up
want
this
Joe
whole
to
time.
answer, then I want Moon to answer. Go ahead.
Actually, I just wanted to talk because this came up earlier, and I was like waving my hand, hoping I'd get a chance to interject. But the problem I feel with a capitalist country's influence overseas is when you bring up China. China is great at soft power. China has made some massive moves in Africa, and I think one of the reasons China is sort of becoming quite popular in certain countries is that it does actually have full control of its corporations. it's a country which allows a sort of capitalist system to run, but everyone is basically afraid of the government. The government isn't afraid of the companies are afraid of the government. So when it kind of gets all these deals going down with Africa, ultimately China can negotiate in a much more effective way. If you were, say, to look at the British Empire, one of the worst things we did was allow the East India Company the amount of freedom it had. It massively fucked things up. It did stupid stunts, if you've ever heard of the whole Sea Boys rebellion and that whole mess. So yes, I'm very cynical about capitalism's power when it comes to overseas negotiations as a soft power, basically. So I'm kind of back in prime a bit here. Not to say that, a communist government is better, but it does have some dark advantages when it comes to how it works with other nations.
I'll reply after Moon.
Uh, like, I guess for me, because I don't disagree with what you're saying per se, Prime. Like, I understand America has its issues, especially with capitalism, and let's be honest, they probably would exploit, if not already do exploit, a lot of countries. So I can't really say anything there per se. However, I guess if we're just like talking about Haiti, right? I guess we would hope for the intervention, and then we would just have to hope some of our politicians can be a bit more sustainable. And when I say that, when it requires sustainability, I mean not just thinking about maximizing profits. It's obviously also benefiting the country. Now, let's be honest, America's not going to want to benefit that country without getting something in return, right? That could mean better trade deals, control of certain resources. But I do think that is a little bit a part of the deal. Like I said, it's more complicated than just this is what's going to work. I'm trying to find out the best way
Look,
because it's
no, at the end of the day, you're right. Like, something for nothing, right? If we go in,
Yeah.
there should be some benefit to. Why is that wrong to have some
That's-
benefit? Because
Well,
ultimately,
you're all good capitalists, I
you
understand.
can benefit a country while also benefiting yourself. This is
You
possible.
can, but not always, right? Not always. Well, you.
No, they haven't in the past.
Sorry.
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you that in the past they've said, fuck you, we're going to exploit the fuck out of you. We don't care. That absolutely has happened. I'm not saying it doesn't. I am just saying that simply by dint of being capitalist does not mean that we are going to, because again, capitalism does exploit everyone. Obviously not. Right?
Obviously, it does. No, actually, it does. I can make that argument easily. Of course, it does.
But you'd be wrong.
Yeah, because you're a fucking filthy centrist. Of course, you were going to say that. No, look. And here's so I appreciate our friend Joe
word.
Brooks, who was trying to help me out with that British example. But I think the way you chose to frame that is still problematic because I don't think if the Crown was directly making decisions for India, the country it was colonizing, that it would have made better decisions for those people. The Crown knew what was happening the entire time. The Crown could have stepped in if they wanted to. You've seen those pictures.
Other systems would let them do what they want, didn't they?
So,
Yeah, but you hold on.
other
Let
would
me.
work.
And I'll answer that in a second. I'll try to do my best there anyway. But the Crown understood what was happening. The royalty would go to India and take tours of it, right? And we have pictures of them where them in their fancy cars driving by people's children literally starving on the streets. The Crown didn't give a fuck, right? And why did the Crown not give a fuck? Because of the burgeoning capitalist system. Wasn't exactly what we have here today, but the burgeoning capitalist system that was undergirding it, that was giving it such an immense amount of wealth. Why would the Crown make any different choices, right? It's going to, if that's the system that it has, then it's going to make decisions to advance itself within that system. So, but then I'm asked what would be better? This is what I'm saying is that we would have to If we are going, if the goal here is to make a benevolent, quote unquote, benevolent overseer, right? Well, then that
Okay.
benevolent overseer needs to have benevolent incentives, right? Incentives that drive it to benevolent outcomes. That actually would take a restructuring of our economy. Whether that becomes quote unquote socialism or not, I don't know. Right? I don't know if that necessarily is the answer, but it would actually take some sort of restructuring of our incentives. It would say that
So
we don't have an economy that benefits our billionaires, right, rather than our people. Like we
So
would have to
Get 'em.
start
if
there.
Get 'em, Moon.
if I may
Yeah.
ask, right? Do
Sure.
you think that if America had more of a social capitalism, do you think if they had that, then they would be better equipped to enter a country like Haiti and help them, or that wouldn't matter at all? I'm sorry if that makes
I would
sense.
say
No,
yeah.
no, no. I hear you. Yeah. I would say marginally so.
So
Go
so
ahead.
just to
You go
justify
first.
that, if our country has the expertise in providing our own citizens with benefits, with a successful welfare state, then that implies we'll be better at doing it somewhere else.
Like,
Yeah.
if I can just give an example, just really quickly, like in Canada, as you guys have probably know, they committed mass genocide against the indigenous, right? So almost like to extinction. I think they killed over like 5 billion buffalo just so that they could take the land, right? What we have done now, I know in BC at least, they just gave $980 million to one of the chiefs for one of the indigenous communities, right? Basically, we're not allowed to like just go onto their reserves. The police can't just go onto their reserves. They can build whatever they want to build and go from there. So they kind of have their own system, but they do work within Canada, right? So they can't like go around and just murder somebody. There's still rules they have to follow, but they do have their own kind of government, if that makes sense. More of like an internal
It's a little
government.
similar here. There's like tribal
Yeah. So
laws, tribal land. Yeah.
I guess what I'm kind of asking is it something similar we could kind of do with Haiti? Now, could we send people there, right? I'm not just saying money is going to solve anything, but could we implement a system that they could be under? Like, for example, if they use like the Canadian system, right? You get free healthcare, you can't commit these type of crimes, right? But they still have their own internal government, if that makes sense. Would that be a better way to approach it? I guess is what I'm kind of curious
Could,
about.
Well,
could
we
you give
have
me
examples of this in like it's like a territory. I think we call it in the U.S. Right?
a
Oh,
colony? That's what it's called. It's literally we call it territory. That's literally the PC name for a colony because we don't want to call it colonies anymore. We call them territories. But go ahead. Yeah, that's what Puerto Rico is.
like America's territories generally like that. Like
Colonies.
Puerto Rico likes to be our colony,
I
right?
mean,
Like,
oh, they didn't.
That's a big
We
question
didn't really
in
help them in
Puerto
the
Rico.
last bunch
No,
of
But
hurricanes, but
is
that's
it?
what I'm curious about. Like, also another fact, the indigenous, they don't pay taxes. So you don't pay taxes, right? They have their own type of tax system. And they still can like create their own jobs. They have systems they can set up. They have their own land. And so that's what I'm kind of curious about. You still work under a government, but then you have your own internal government, right?
So yeah, you're talking. Wick is correct because what you're describing is just another colony, right? So we set up a colonial government there, and they have to obey our rules with less ability to alter like the overall national governance, right? So like, but Puerto Rico has these bases, these naval bases on their island, which has been poisoning like their island for forever, right? That's been a big issue, but they don't have the ability to make their case in Congress. They don't actually have an ability to govern
Mm.
their island, so they get the benefit of, I guess, the American military, but they also get the detriment of the American military.
Well, what I'm wondering is if they could move toward a system like we've moved towards. I think it really could work. I really think you could implement this. Like if you could have an American government or a Canadian government oversee the creation of like a new system, and then you give it to the people after a certain point, right? But they still fall within certain laws, right? You still certain crimes you cannot commit. They will be judged by like our system since it's already there, it's already set up, right? I think
Are you
that would be a
asking for
way.
Japan, basically? Are you asking for basically what happened after the War of Japan? That like we could design their
we got
constitution and say, here
anime
you go.
out of that. We
We
got
got
all
anime.
sorts of great
That's
things.
true.
Look,
Hentai.
But that's what I brought up in the beginning. Like, cool. If you guys want to do that, you got to occupy them for 50 years. How many Americans would be down for that right now?
Yeah, I am.
Not a whole lot.
Well,
Wow, it's
I,
interesting to. because
Oh, sorry.
I
No,
think
you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm a bit of a Hitchens fan, and he was quite controversial on the left for being someone who actually supported going into Afghanistan. I was reading one of his books, and he basically said, I mean, he died quite young in his 60s, but he was basically saying he expected the US to be there while his grandchildren were growing up. So he, from the start, expected they would be there for like 40, 50 years, it seems. So it doesn't seem like it was that controversial opinion to the point where some fairly popular figures were openly suggesting this was what should be done.
Wait, just historical note. So Germany we occupied from 1945 to 1990, Cold or unified in 1990 when the Cold War ended. But Japan, it looks like we occupied for like 8 years.
Yeah, I guess Japan was a little quicker than most, but we also like nuked them and raised a lot of them first. So I don't know. I mean, and still, we didn't like occupy it necessarily, but American influence was still
No,
very, very
we
strong.
had 600,000 down to 300,000 troops.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Okay.
it's
Yeah, but a mooncake, is that what you wanted? Japanese situation?
Um,
oh,
I'm honestly with the Japanese situation, I'm not too familiar. So I don't want to give too much of an opinion on that. Like I know they were there for a bit, but I'm not like too
But
familiar with that.
but basically,
I just
what
want
I'm
to be
asking you
careful.
is that like sure, then forget Japan. I'm saying that like what you're asking is that we create some sort of system and hand it over to these people, and say like these are the rules that you follow. Well, that sounds like to me like we're handing them a constitution, saying that these are how you're going to govern yourself. We'll stay there for a little bit to make sure you get the program, and then we pull out.
I just
Gang,
wanted to bring up
before
some
before we
very
go too far, I know that it's getting late. We're almost at 8, and I want to give everyone a chance to have their outros, tell people who they are, where they can find you, post your links and stuff. I want to be respectful of people's time. I know that Prime has a show coming up, and we'll be rating into that. So I'm sorry to cut you off. We do need at a certain point, right? I'll be real with you, gang. This conflict has stun locked me. So I don't know. I'm going to have a call-in show tomorrow, but I don't know what's up on the docket for the rest of the week. We'll find out. I might do a capitalism exploitative or not panel later in the week because that was an interesting discussion we had. But tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for more updates. We're going to have open call-ins, and then we'll go from there. But I want to give each of these individuals a chance to introduce themselves, tell them where they can find them, and closing thoughts on the subject. Please be brief because, again, time is of the essence, and I know that Prime has to go. So, Prime, you get the first crack at
Before I,
this.
before I leave, I just want to yes or no answer from Mooncake. Mooncake, what's my question?
Sorry, just can you repeat it really quickly again? I'm sorry.
Constitution, hand it to them. Do you want to do that?
Um, uh, is it bad if I say like yes and no? Like I know I'm not trying to like weasel my way out of it, but I'm just trying to think of another way to go about it. Like I'm just trying to think of like a better way if you think that capitalism is so evil. So I'm just like I'm
Okay,
putting ideas out there.
TBD, got it. But
Okay.
anyway, thank you all. Thank you to my man Wick. I give him a lot of shit. And that'll always be the case, right? Like on his grave, right? On his tombstone marker, I'm going to like spray paint that he sucks. But I'll have hearts next to it, right? Because I love my friend Wick. Um, so
XO, fuck you, Wick. XO, XO, go on.
Sub to
yeah,
Wick,
pretty
he
much.
sucks.
Wick's an amazing individual. Please, give to my friend Wick. Support this community. He's building a really great one. And shout out to all these people that I'm meeting here today. Right, Socrates. Great friend. Mooncake like not on my heard. Socrates, great friend. To the channel who I miss going through your Weird Al phase. Okay, all right, you've been busy. But I hope to see you again soon. But Mooncake, you were fantastic. Seriously, I would love to talk to you again. In the
Yeah,
future.
me too.
Yeah, great. I think we could have some interesting discussions. And Alucard, like awesome. Like I like that you have like this like a muscular U.S. stance. I don't talk to too many people who have exactly your stance. So shout out to you, man. And I'd love to talk to you in the future as well as you, Joe. I want to hear more from you. So thank you all again. I gotta go start my show on twitch.tv and youtube.com/primekai, PRIMECAYES. And yeah, so I'm going to do that now. Bye bye, everyone. So, yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
Prime.
We'll right into you after this.
Bye.
See you later, Prime. Socrates, go ahead. Closing thoughts. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so it seems like we mostly agreed that it's not good if America loses our global influence. Although maybe it's good if we stop foolishly knocking down regimes. And then there's this question of, is it possible for us to modulate any slider other than just how much interference we have in other countries? Is there truly a way for us to modulate a beneficial versus just self-interested or utterly messy influence that we can have on other countries? I think that America, where we're at right now, we're at a little bit of hopefully a point where we can tip over into understanding that hawkishness and invasions of regimes that we just had some excitement to go knock over is not good, but we can actually do good things in the world, and then actually maybe start by building that expertise at home, start by building infrastructure here, start by building social programs. What you guys have in Canada is pretty cool when it comes to healthcare. So I think the future is bright, but there's a lot of work to do.
Socrates, where can people find you?
You can find me here at Socrates TV. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got to start throwing stuff up on there. And I've got a Twitter, Real Socrates.
Check him out, gang.
The
He's
one and
great.
only.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Alucard, go ahead.
All right. So I guess for my closing statement, my motto is go hard or go home. I think if the United States intervenes somewhere, we should straight up annex the place, because once again, I don't believe the American public has the appetite for prolonged occupations and sort of nation slash institution building exercises, and we don't have another proven method of building out those institutions other than prolonged kind of, maybe not necessarily occupation, but sort of a prolonged, let's say, stick over the head of the nation in question. So that is my stance. Otherwise, in terms of the decline of Pax Americana, I think America is doing okay. I think some of the political moods have been shifting, and they're unfavorable towards that. And once again, our defense industrial base, which we didn't really get to talk much about, but I think that can be stepped up. Matter of fact, our military budget needs to be increased, baby. Get that thing to at least $1 trillion. But yeah, so that is my take. I think America is strong for now, and our policies are quite okay. And I guess you can find me at twitch.tv/AlgardHex. Although I'm not streaming right now, I'm not really planning to stream, but in the event I do, you can follow me there. And also I have the same handle on Twitter, AlgardHex, where I primarily talk about international relations and specifically Ukraine-related stuff, because that's where I'm from, born and raised. But occasionally I dabble in some other memes as well. And I guess, yeah, I'd be glad to hop on more of these panels in the future.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you
Go
for having
check
me,
him
Whick.
out. Follow him on Twitter, and in case he streams, follow him on the other platforms you mentioned as well. Joe, buddy, and us strong.
Thanks, Whick. My name's, well, it's Joe Brooks. It feels weird to do that. But you can find me on Twitter at SoulPatchAndBuff, and you can find me on YouTube at just Joe Brooks. That's not just Joe Brooks, it's Joe Brooks. KES at the end. I'm currently posting some opinion pieces. I'm planning to maybe do some big video trying to explain the mess about anime and race. The last time I addressed anime, fans went and got my channel deleted. So this new one is only on 8 subs. If anyone wants to throw one my way, it'd be nice. Sorry, I didn't have something to get really passionate and scream about this time, Wick.
You'll
I
get there.
find Pax Americana. It's a bit harder to get angry about it than when discussing pornography, I'm afraid. But hope to see you guys again. And yep, that'll be me out. Bye.
Peace out, Girl
Cheers.
Scout. Oh, he didn't have to actually.
Oh.
Wait, we have one more.
I was
we
gonna
have
tell him how
one
awesome
more.
his hair is.
We have one more outro to do.
Didn't expect to get
Mooncake.
upstage
Oh.
like that.
Yeah, I did get upstage, didn't I? No, that was a great conversation, and thank you for letting me be a part of it. Just to kind of end it, I do think America is losing its influence. It does concern me a little bit. As you know, Canada, America, we are like this. We are neighbors, we are friends, and we kind of need to be there for each other. I just don't want people to give up on our systems just yet. I think our democracies, the way we get to vote, the way we get to live. It kind of shows where we are as countries. Once again, some of the best doctors on the planet in Canada, free healthcare, which is great. So I just think don't give up on that yet. But yeah, you can find me on twitch.tv. It's Mooncake XOXO. I play League of Legends. I just chit chat a little bit, and I'm, like I said, really into history. So any sorry, I can't talk tonight. Finds we can chit chat about, and that's about it.
No, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. Hope you all had fun. Gang, like I said, tomorrow, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be having call-ins. So if you have big thoughts about all the things that are going on in the world, if you have big anger at me for my takes, or if you agree with my takes and you want to sound off, that's the time to do it. I don't know if I'll have a guest or not with me. That's up in the air. I guess I'll have to find out if anyone wants to hang out with me for a couple hours. But for now, we'll send you off to Prime Kai, like I said. So give me a second. We'll raid out. And remember, if you enjoyed this show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this on Kick or on Twitch, hit that follow button. I appreciate all the subs. We could use more of those, more subs, more viewers would be great. And super chats would be great as well. Thanks again. We will see you tomorrow. Wait, bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wait, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
All right.
See you
Sweet.
guys later.
Hey, that was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that debate. It was pretty chill. Other than Moon and Prime going ham on each other about capitalism. So how you guys feeling? If you have any questions or comments about the debate, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I'll probably raid out to Prime as well. Yeah, the Ukrainian guy, I've already magically forgotten his name. I couldn't tell exactly. It seemed like he was like 70-80% serious. It was just like, pro America. Let's get that oil. Let's get that influence. It's so funny how quickly modern day Republicans forget about the Bush era, and if you don't love war, then you hate the troops. All of these like insane things that were slung out. Nation building doesn't work, you guys. Just have to annex them. Yeah, that was weird. It was weird how that talking point of okay, well, Germany, it was kind of complicated, and Russia was more kind of deeply involved, and it was like a back and forth, and it was part of the Cold War, and that wasn't really resolved for 45 years. But we weren't like actively nation building for 45 years. And in Japan, I guess it took like just 8 years. I mean, having having a more peaceful world is a benefit. Having trade partners can be a benefit. So this question of like, does it have to be just some purely humanitarian, basically charity on one hand, or are we going to colonize them and extract their natural resources on the other? And there's really no in between. I mean, I think it's possible to have a mutually beneficial relationship between nations, and for us to nation build a country that we want to be neighbors with. Nation building might work if the goal was to actually help build a self-sufficient nation without trying to make them a client state of ours. Yeah. I mean, when it came to Iraq and Afghanistan, there was so much working against us. Among other things, the deep lack of appreciation for how unbelievably far from an understanding of the functioning of their countries, of their worlds was. The fact that our army went in and our nation building went in without translators. The fact that we just didn't understand culturally how they operated. It was pretty bad. And especially that we were not only so it's one thing trying to basically to say, look, there's a lot of gangs operating violently. We need to do what we can to limit the amount of violence. I think that as a goal, I think is a kind of feasible one. We could go and we could say, So one thing that actually didn't come up, which was unfortunate, is that we never brought up countries wanting us there. It seems like that's the first question we have to ask, where we say, hey, it seems like you guys are having a rough time. Would you like some help? In general, in life, that's kind of a good question to ask if it seems like somebody's struggling, especially if they're not a close friend. So this kind of question of like, either we're invading or we're peacekeeping or something. The first question to ask is, do they want help, and do they want help from us? And at the very least, then they can assess, what do we put the odds at that the U.S. can actually help us in some way. Just taking a look at what you guys are saying. Afghanistan blackpilled me on that ever being possible. Literally didn't have a plan. Yeah, the idea of the U.S. or any imperialist country doing this honestly without an interior motive is patently absurd. We got there and we thought we could just figure it out along the way and work backwards, pretty much because we're a sovereign nation. International cooperation through orgs like the UN is preferable to citizens of a sovereign nation deciding the fate of others. Yeah, and so I was hoping we would spend a little bit more time talking about the UN, because I see the UN as the entity that we've designated to carry out a lot of these actions, and I think the UN has had at least some level of success. I don't know so much about their operations in Africa, but I've read up on their operations in Israel during the Sinai crisis, and it seems like they had a decent level of effectiveness. But now it seems like the United States, or with the Trump presidency and Nikki Haley as ambassador, was basically saying, we don't want to play ball with the UN. We're saying we don't want you guys to really have like capabilities or the stamp of approval of the United States, but we also don't want to do these peacekeeping missions. NATO as well, hostile to both. I mean, NATO could be a little bit more complicated. I think for the reasons that you stated, which were that NATO is like a military alliance among other things, versus the UN it was founded with these somewhat loftier goals of you know, whether they can be carried out, and they're very often quite quite toothless and criticized for being quite toothless, but a toothless organization that at least is ostensibly dedicated to humanitarian issues and world justice, um, rather than a military alliance that if NATO wants to do some operation in the world, they're very capable of doing so in a way that the UN often is not. But if that involves following the United States into military adventuring in the Middle East, it doesn't always turn out well. European Union was a new structure created for cooperation, but doesn't handle their military affairs. NATO does civic cooperation, except Pax Britannia, UK leaving the European Union. I don't know if they're really mostly just shooting themselves in the foot with that. I don't know what that's going to mean for the EU. I think it's pretty much Germany kind of running things in the EU at this point, especially with no UK. So I guess they're happy they got control over Europe without. Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna read off to Prime Kai. I think they're talking about. It says drug policy. But it said Israel earlier. I'm not sure what they're talking about. But Prime's great. I think we started streaming about the same time a few years ago during the pandemic. So I'm really happy to see how much he's taken off. It was great to see him. So say hi to Prime Kai. Come by. I'm going to probably keep streaming. Going to be mostly talking about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. It's tough because it's hard to know where to start. There's just so much background. Maybe I'll do a stream really just going through kind of a timeline of history. And it seems like there's just not great information out there in terms of really even just a timeline, how what moves kind of early Zionists, kind of idea makers, and then Zionist settlers and militants. Promote your content more. Twitter's dead. Yeah, I mean, I don't use Twitter because I already, my mind already has struggles. I don't want to hurt myself by just being on the hell site. Yeah. Was that an offer to teach me how to be Gen Z? Because history streamers, aristocracy is great. Is she even still talking? I've chatted with her and been on panels before. I should hit her up actually. I'd be curious to see what she has to say. I haven't. Has she been streaming, or is she not on Twitch anymore? Because I haven't seen her at all. No, I like aristocracy. It's not great. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Honestly, I had a pretty good conversation with Whick. I felt good about my conversation with Oleg. But yeah, I think I need to branch out and see more of the newer politics. You'll teach me? Okay. Let me know when your voice recovers. And then Yeah, you can teach me how to do all this social media stuff. All right. Give Prime my best. Be good chatters for him. All right. Have a good night, y'all.
Missed you. It's only been a week, but it's been forever.
No, I miss you too. I miss you too. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to talking to this exquisite that you've assembled here today. And I have some opinions, as always, that I like to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right. Our friend Corey is also here as well. Socrates, thank you for rating. Shout out to my man Socrates, who was part of the last panel. It was on.